knowing what you're talking about. There's some times when people act as if they know what they're talking about, but they don't. And they misuse words. And because they're misusing words, they think that they are stating truths when they're just stating their misconceptions. So there was a post that someone posted recently, and it said, "Single men do everything for themselves, but you never hear a man calling himself an independent man. It's just being an adult." Well, first off, this is not factual. Single men are far behind single women in a lot of areas, like high school graduation, college graduation, owning homes, and moving out of their parents' home and living on their own. So no, single men, as a monolith in America, do not do everything on their own. In fact, there's a whole group of single people called NEETs, not employed in education or training, that encompasses men and women that is not doing things on their own. They're literally living off their parents. So that is a fallacy, that post. And so when I responded to it with kind of that kind of statement, a man said that I was basically he said I was trying to get rid of misogyny while supporting misogyny, and wanting and expecting the man to do what old heads did while expecting them to be progressive is not happening. So the problem with his comment is he's misunderstanding the terms he's using. All right. Misogyny is the hatred or contempt of women or girls. Patriarchy is a system of society in which men hold the power and women are largely excluded from it. I do not support misogyny, and I don't support patriarchy. Tradition is the transmission of customs or beliefs from generation to generation. Now, there are some things in patriarchy that are traditions, and there are other things that can be taken as just traditions because they existed before patriarchy was created. See, the thing about patriarchy is we can put a date on it. We know that it's been around about 8,800 years. And before that, societies still existed. And before that, those societies were egalitarian. They were equal societies where men and women both could hold positions of power, where men and women could choose to marry and divorce, where men and women could trace the lines of their lineage, and women could pass their property down the matrilineal line, as well as pass it down the paternal line. So those societies existed. And in those societies, there were times when men paid for everything in the way that they paid, which could have been cattle, which could have been agriculture, which could have been service. So the idea of a man paying for everything isn't something that only exists within patriarchy. Just like if we were looking at monetary systems, capitalism is one monetary system. Barter is another. Communism is another. Socialism is another. That doesn't mean, we should have learned this in school. You can have a Venn diagram where you have two circles that overlap. And in the center, you have things that are in common. So if we were to overlap tradition and patriarchy, there would be things in the middle that are in common. But there would also be things outside that are separate. So if I want to keep something that's traditional, like, for example, getting married is a tradition. It also can be patriarchal, but it also can be egalitarian. So marriage itself is not just something that has to be in one of those Venn diagram circles. It can exist in all three. It can be egalitarian. It can be patriarchal. And it can have, like I said, common characteristics in the middle. So when men act as if it's one thing or the other, they're not understanding the terms they're using. Tradition and patriarchy are not synonymous. Misogyny and tradition are not synonymous. Patriarchy doesn't have everything in it as misogynistic. There are some things that might have been helpful at the time to both genders, but still, again, they kept power away from women. So we have to know what we're talking about, and we have to actually use terms correctly and not just say something that sounds good. And traditions, again, can exist or coexist alongside of progress. And that should be where we're trying to head. We should be trying to head in the direction of evolving our marriages, evolving our relationships, evolving our communication, evolving past patriarchy back to egalitarianism, but also understanding where we've come from, the history that led us to this point. So the idea that these things, like I said, we have to know what we're talking about, and we have to know when we're talking about misogyny, patriarchy, or tradition. Those three are not synonymous. And thinking that some woman who enjoys certain things from tradition is supporting misogyny is not true or factual. It's like if there's a woman who likes being choked or spanked, during an intimate act, that doesn't mean that she wants to be physically abused outside of it. There is a time and a place for everything. And there's a difference between someone who enjoys rough intimacy and someone who says, hey, I don't want to be physically abused. Those are two different things. So acting as if they are the same is acting as if tradition and misogyny are the same, when there are lots of things that are traditional that have nothing to do with misogyny, have nothing to do with patriarchy. They're just human desires that people have had and have expressed even prior to patriarchy, even prior to misogyny. Because marriage just didn't start to happen when we had patriarchy.